Stephen Hand from the Staccato School of Defence in Hobart. A few weeks ago I did a video on George Silver's True and False Times, and after it went up on YouTube, one of my students got into a fairly animated discussion with somebody who didn't like the way that I was leading with the hand in my attacks in that video. And specifically, he was saying that it wasn't that I was leading with the hand before the foot, but that I was leading with the hand rather than the sword. And so I thought I'd explain why I lead with the hand in attack. And it's primarily so that I can do second intention or compound attacks. Now, what are second intention attacks? Well, basically an attack can come in first intention or second intention. If I make an attack in first intention or a simple attack, right, the attack will come in one line and it will go straight in that fencing line to that target. Right? It will not deviate, it will go straight in one fencing line to a target, whatever that target is. If I do a second intention attack, what I'm intending to do is I start an attack in one line, I draw a defence. If they don't defend properly, then it becomes a simple attack, right? They don't defend, the attack just goes straight home. That's not an issue. If they do defend the attack, then I'll wait for the parry and then change the line of attack and attack in a different line to a different target. And ideally I'll do that in one smooth, continuous motion. And that's a second intention attack. The classic one in modern fencing, you attack, you draw a parry across the body, disengage and continue your attack in another line. So that's second intention attack. Now, I've heard some people say that there are no second intention attacks in Silver. Well, that's just rubbish, because firstly it talks about them, and secondly we're really not going to go back to the Egerton Castle days. Egerton Castle was a Victorian fencing historian, and he infamously wrote about how all early fencing before rapiers was rough, untutored fighting with no science behind it. Second intention attacks are the basis of all higher level fencing, and I don't know of any fencing system that doesn't include them. So let's have a look at how they manifest themselves in Silver. When I first started looking at Silver nearly over 25 years ago now, I didn't start thinking about compound or second intention attacks until I came across the following passage. At Brief Instructions, Chapter 4, Section 27, Silver says, always remembering, if you fight upon the variable fight, so variable fight is largely Staccato, Passata. The main guard is Staccato. Always remembering, if you fight upon the variable fight, that you ward upon forehand ward. Otherwise your space will be too wide in due time to make a true garden ward to defend yourself. Okay, so let's have a look and see if this is true. I had problems with it at the time because, as we're about to see, unless you're doing second intention attacks, it's actually not a bad thing to do. So if I attack Lewis, if he's in Staccato, which is the most common position of variable fight, and he goes to parry in true garden, let's see if he has any difficulty getting up there to make that parry. Going a bit faster. Any trouble getting up there?
None whatsoever.
No, none whatsoever. So That's what we found some years ago when we first started looking at silver. It was like, well, why is he telling you not to do this? It actually seems like a pretty good thing to do, to come up into true garden water. And this brings up a really important element of analysing fencing manuals. If a master tells you not to do something and you can't work out why he's telling you not to do it, go and do it. Do it and ask your friends, ask your students, break this. Okay, the master says I shouldn't do it, so I'm going to do it, see if you can break it. And we played around with it, and I went back and looked at silver, and eventually I found 2 passages that gave me a hint as to how I could break a true garden parry, why it's not a smart move to do a true garden ward from variable fight. The first passage is Brief Instructions, Chapter 5, Section 7, where Silver says, "Also see that he deceive you not upon any false offering, to strike at the one side, and then thereby you have turned your point aside, then to strike on the other side." So pretty clearly that's talking about a second intention attack. You go to strike on one side, when the parry comes in, you strike on the other side. Couldn't be much clearer than that. The other passage is Paradox 24 from Paradoxes of Defence. And this is one of the most deeply misunderstood and misquoted passages in all of silver. What you really need to understand when you're looking at this passage is that the whole point of Paradox 24, it's about sword and buckler versus sword and dagger. And Silver's saying sword and buckler is good, sword and dagger is not so good because you can't parry with a dagger. Now hopefully you will have seen my video on parrying cuts with the dagger. And as well as not being strong enough, Silver says daggers are really easy to deceive. He says even thrusts can deceive a dagger, all right? A thrust may be put aside with the force of a child, but so there's not an issue with power, but there's an issue with the dagger being easy to deceive. So let's see what Silver wrote, and he frames it as he frames quite a few things in terms of here's an argument, and it's not actually my argument, and now I'm going to knock it down and tell you what I actually think. "But let the warder with his dagger say that it is not true which I have said, for the eyes to behold the blow or thrust coming, so has he as good time to defend himself. Herein he shall find himself deceived too. This is the reason. The hand is the swiftest motion, the foot is the slowest. Without distance, the hand is tied to the motion of the feet, whereby the time of the hand is made as slow as the foot, because whereby we redeem every time lost upon his coming in by the slow motion of the foot, and have time thereby to judge when and how he can perform any action whatsoever, and so have we the time of the hand to the time of the feet." Now, if we just stop there, which I know people who've done, people have used this bit of the passage to say, well, Silver's saying that attacks from outside a distance are slow, the hand's slowed to the speed of the foot, the attacks are really wide and obvious, and you can parry them. But that's missing the whole point of Paradox 24, which is saying, no, you can't parry them, all right? Attacks deceive dagger parries. That's the whole point of Paradox 24. And Silver goes on to say, "Now is the hand in his own course more swift than the foot or eye, therefore within distance the eye is deceived and judgment is lost, and that is another cause that the warder with the dagger, although he has perfect eyes, is still within distance deceived." So what he's actually saying here is that, yes, while you're coming in from without distance, outside distance, your hand must go as slowly as the foot, as I showed in my earlier video on true and false times. But the moment you start to break distance, the moment you start to come within distance, your hand not being tied to the speed of your foot because you've attacked in a true time, can speed up and change direction. And doing this allows you to deceive the dagger parry. Alright, so let's put this into practice. Silver's told us that if we attack on one side attack one side, draw the parry, and then attack on the other side, that's how we do a second intention attack. He's also told us that we move the hand slowly in time with the foot until we start to break distance, until we start to come within distance, and at that point we can speed up, change direction and deceive the parry. So let's put that into practice. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm moving my hand forward, I'm drawing the parry, and then just allowing my hand to just flow around it to strike Lewis in the arm. And if he gets his arm out of the way, that's just fine because his head's right behind it. Now, let's get back to the first point that I was making in the video. The first point I was making was that there was a chap who was saying to one of my students that he didn't like the way I was leading with the hand, not leading with the blade. And the whole point of leading with the hand, well, apart from the fact that Silver tells you to, everything he says, whatsoever is done with the hand before the foot or feet is true fight. All of the true times are move the hand first. It's hand, body and foot. All right, and when I first looked at that, I thought, all right, well, that means move the sword. But actually now I think it means move the hand. All right, move the hand and just sort of let the sword just sort of hang behind a little bit. Let's have a look at what happens if I try to do the same action I just did, moving the sword forward a lot earlier in the action. Horrible. Okay, and compare that with what I was doing earlier. Hopefully you can see that there's a very big difference. There's a very big difference in tempo. Right, a tempo as defined by Aristotle back in 300 and whatever BC is a movement between two stillnesses, and that's the idea of time that is still used in fencing to the modern day. And what you should have noticed is that when I attack leading with the blade, I have to pull the blade back to get around the parry, and that means that my action is in two tempi, in two packets of time. I move my hand forward, I have to stop it, I have to pull it back. The fact that I'm pulling my sword back means that I'm not creating a threat, and that by definition is a false time. And so I'm doing a second tempo that's in a false time, and I can and should be hit when I do that. When I do it with moving the hand forward, I just casually roll the hand around, and it's one smooth, continuous motion, one single tempo. Let's just have a quick look at what Lewis can do if I attack leading with the sword. And this is why I'm wearing a Van Brace. Oh, that's just so bad. And again, look at the moment when I hit him, when I'm moving the hand first. It's the moment that he was expecting to make the parry. All right? I'm striking in one time, one tempo. I'm also striking in the time that he's doing his parry, the tempo of his parry. So, what have we learnt? What have we learnt in the video? What have we concluded? Silver does second intention attacks. He clearly describes them, and he describes in Paradox 24 how they should be done. In doing that, he solves the problem of why you shouldn't parry true guarded from variable fight, which, if you're only doing direct attacks, seems like a pretty smart thing to do. It seems like a pretty useful thing to do. But once you start doing second intention attacks, it breaks very, very quickly. So we've seen how Silver does his second intention attacks, and hopefully we've seen how it's really important when you're doing a second intention attack that you lead with the hand. And see how my point, it almost seems like my point's going backwards, but it's not. It's my hand's going forward and my point's barely moving at all. And then at the moment I want to change direction, I can just pivot my hand in any direction. Right? I could attack underneath this. If you could go to garden, I could attack underneath the sword as well. Okay, I can change my hand to go in almost any direction. If I had a cross-hilted sword, I wouldn't lead as much with the hand because I don't have as much protection. Okay, but with a basket hilt, it's very safe to lead with the hand, and it enables you to do second intention attacks in the way that Silver describes in Brief Instructions and Paradoxes, and it enables you to fight at a much higher level. When we started doing this, our level of fencing went way up. Okay, so George Silver's second intention attacks. Thanks for watching.